Rescuers battle to find survivors after Japan's earthquakes as the number of dead rises to 48. A Coast Guard plane on its way to deliver aid to quake-affected areas collides with a passenger jet at Tokyo Airport. Intense fighting continues across Gaza, with more than 200 Palestinians killed in the past 24 hours, as Israel claims to have captured another Hamas stronghold. And Russia continues to ramp up attacks on Ukraine. At least 5 people are killed as missiles hit Kyiv and Kharkiv. Japan's Prime Minister says rescue teams are in a battle against time to find survivors after a series of strong earthquakes. The confirmed death toll from the quakes, the largest of which was magnitude 7.6, has risen to at least 48 people. Tsunami warnings have now been lifted across the wider region, but there are fears that many people are still trapped under rubble, while some are stranded in remote areas. A government spokesperson has warned of more possible tremors.
To the people of Japan, please be on alert that there may be earthquakes for about a week of an intensity of up to 7. To the people that live in the areas where the quake was strong, please look out for evacuation information through local offices, on TV, radio and internet, and take action accordingly.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Chris Gilbert, who is in Tokyo. So Chris fears that time is now running out in the search for survivors from this earthquake.
Yeah, that's right. The Prime Minister has called it a battle against the clock, a battle against time, and that was about 12 hours ago. The rescue efforts have continued throughout the day, but we have to understand that this Noto Peninsula part of the country is very mountainous, very isolated. There are lots of pockets of small towns and villages. There's not really a big city that has been affected, but the isolated communities very much have. And they've also been affected by landslides and damaged roads. It makes it vital to find other ways, such as by helicopter, by plane and by boat, to get aid and assistance into the area. But beyond aid and assistance, it's a struggle for the government to even find ways to find how significant, how vast the devastation is. They're trying to work with local leaders, local bodies in the area that govern local pockets of the Noto Peninsula to find out what the devastation has been in their neighborhood. But on top of that, the water is still inconsistent in some places. There are reports of people melting snow for water. Energy is still cut to about 30,000 households. Hospitals are working on generators in these conditions, and as you can see, we're entering the second very cold night in Japan for people who may be stuck in their homes, stuck in other places, or are indeed waiting for rescue.
And meanwhile, Chris, a Japanese Coast Guard plane that had been headed for some quake-affected areas has collided with a passenger jet at Tokyo Airport.
Yeah, it's a tragedy on top of tragedy here. I mean, we're 2 days into 2024. And we've had 2 absolutely spectacular and tragic events. The Coast Guard plane, according to local reports, was entering the tarmac at the same time that the Japan Airlines plane was landing, and that caused the collision. Now, we do know that there were 6 people on board the Coast Guard plane. 5 of them have died. The captain is in a critical condition. No confirmation about his state at the moment, but remarkably, 379 passengers and crew on the Japan Airlines plane, an Airbus A350, a huge vessel, all evacuated, despite the fact it was on fire by the time it came to a stop. 17 injuries, 4 people taken to hospital, 2 for minor injuries, 2 for smoke inhalation. So an absolutely commendable job by the Japan Airlines staff to rescue all of themselves and all of the passengers and get them to safety and what we now know could have been an absolutely catastrophic disaster.
Chris, thank you very much. Our correspondent Chris Gilbert in Tokyo. There's been another night of Israeli bombardment in central and southern Gaza, with Palestinian officials saying more than 200 people were killed in the past 24 hours. Israel says its troops have captured a Hamas stronghold in Gaza City, with special forces battling Hamas fighters inside tunnel networks. The IDF has also started withdrawing some of its troops from parts of northern Gaza. More than 22,000 Palestinians have been killed since the latest conflict began in October. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in central Gaza, Noor Harazin. So, Noor, which areas of Gaza have been targeted in these most recent strikes?
Well, talking about the most recent strikes are actually happening where I am in Middle Gaza, in Deir el-Balah, Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, and also Al-Bureij refugee camp. And just an hour ago, the Israeli warplanes targeted several homes in Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, killing 10 people. 5 of them are children. They are all from the Darwish family. Also, in one of the highlights, an Israeli strike targeted the Red Crescent clinic in Khan Yunis city, killing dozens of people, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. And in a joint statement with the Palestinian Media Office here in Gaza, they said that 207 people were killed in Gaza over the past 24 hours. And this brings up the death toll in Gaza since the 7th of October up to 22,187 people. 70% of them are women and children. Let me also bring you up to date to the battles on the ground. Actually, the Israeli army withdrew from large areas from southern Gaza and, northern Gaza, where families who are still inside northern Gaza and they did not evacuate, they managed to go out in the streets, take tours around northern Gaza. However, the battles and the Israeli ground invasion intensifies here in middle Gaza and also in southern Gaza, specifically in eastern Al-Bureij refugee camp.
And some Palestinians killed in Israeli raids in the West Bank. What's happening there?
Well, tension between Palestinian fighters and the Israeli military started in the West Bank following the 7th of October. I mean, since then, and there were daily clashes in several Palestinian cities around the West Bank, in Nablus, in Qalqilia, in Hebron. Overnight, the Israeli forces raided the Azron camp in the city of Qalqilia. According to the Palestinian medical sources, 4 people were killed. More Israeli troops entered the Jenin refugee camp. Also, a number of people were reported injured, while we're talking about hundreds of people that were arrested from their homes during these Israeli night raids on several Palestinian cities around the West Bank.
Noor, thank you very much. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Israel says it won't boycott a case at the International Court of Justice. It was launched by South Africa at the weekend. Pretoria has accused Israel of genocidal acts in Gaza. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Trent Murray, who's in Tel Aviv. So, Trent, what else have we heard from the Israeli government about this case?
Well, Robin, it's been a fairly terse reaction from the Israeli government to this case, which has been brought forward by South Africa. We know, of course, Pretoria, in its court filings, has said Israel is breaching the 1948 Genocide Convention at the UN. And has launched a case at the International Court of Justice to try and hold them to account for those alleged crimes. The Israelis, within minutes really of those papers being filed on Friday, came out with a strong written reaction saying South Africa's claim has no factual or judicial basis. And it went on to say, we call on the ICJ and the international community to reject these baseless claims. But we have heard a little bit more in the past few hours. The official government spokesperson here, Elon Levy, speaking at the Monday press conference on behalf of the Israeli government. He had pretty strong words for South Africa. Let's have a listen.
The State of Israel emphatically condemns South Africa's decision to play advocate for the devil and to make itself criminally complicit with the perpetrators of the October 7 massacre. On October 7, South Africa openly aligned itself with the Hamas rapist regime when it blamed Israel for Hamas's violation of the ceasefire and covered up Hamas's crimes against humanity.
And Robin, just in the past half hour or so, I've been speaking to the spokesperson for South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Vincent Magwenya. I asked him for reaction to those comments from Israel. He said simply, we look forward to the commencement of the court process.
And Trent, there's been a decision by Israel's Supreme Court which has struck down a highly disputed law designed to roll back the power of the judicial system. What's been the reaction to that?
Yeah, look, this is a move which is likely to reignite tensions within the country. These judicial laws which were pushed forward by the government of Benjamin Netanyahu way before October 7th sort of took over the domestic political conversation here. We know, of course, there were huge protests in the streets and many people from across Israeli society and the political scene coming out in opposition of these laws. Well, as you said, the court ruled 8 votes to 7 that they were unlawful. Now, this is now being very closely watched by many people here in terms of how the government responds. We know, of course, this really was probably one of the most fractious debates within Israeli politics leading up to October 7th, and now 2 of Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet ministers are known critics of his decision to push through these laws earlier. Now, publicly, what some of those politicians are saying is that the country is now on a war footing, and so the domestic political conversation will change. But some of those parties which are really holding Benjamin Netanyahu's government together are fierce supporters of these laws and will be looking to him, one would imagine, to try and find a workaround of this Supreme Court decision. If that doesn't happen, then it's not impossible to imagine a scenario where his government falls or breaks apart. We're certainly not there yet, but it's absolutely clear that this is a very, very key political issue for many within his government, and this Supreme Court decision will really throw a spanner in the works in terms of their legislative agenda moving forward.
Trent, thank you very much. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. Russia has launched another wave of deadly attacks on Ukraine, hitting Kyiv and the northeast city of Kharkiv. 4 people were killed and dozens injured as multiple missiles hit the capital. 1 person died in Kharkiv and at least 44 were injured. Moscow has admitted accidentally striking a Russian village close to the Ukraine border, causing a fire which damaged homes. The attacks are the latest in an escalation of the conflict over the Christmas period, which included Ukraine striking a Russian border town, something Russia's president said would not go unpunished.
They want firstly to intimidate us and then create some kind of uncertainty inside our country. For our part, we will increase the strikes that I talked about. Undoubtedly, such crime, and this of course is a crime, against a civilian population will not go unpunished.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Will UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak make a gamble on an early general election? It's a big year ahead for British politics.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. So it's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly. way. This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The World Today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. A race against time. Rescuers battle to find survivors after Japan's earthquakes as the number of dead rises to 48. Intense fighting continues across Gaza with more than 200 Palestinians killed in the past 24 hours as Israel claims to have captured another Hamas stronghold. And Russia continues to ramp up attacks on Ukraine. At least 5 people are killed as missiles hit Kyiv and Kharkiv. South Korea's opposition leader is in hospital after being stabbed in the neck. Lee Jae-myung was attacked while he was speaking to reporters in the port of Busan. Doctors say he's in a stable condition. The suspect, a 66-year-old man, told police he planned to kill the Democratic Party leader, but has not given a motive. Lee narrowly lost the presidential election in 2022. Talk of a general election is set to dominate UK politics over the coming months. The government has a deadline of next January to hold the vote, but after years of political turmoil in Westminster, the opposition Labour Party holds a commanding lead in the opinion polls. Our correspondent Paul Hawkins looks ahead.
At the start of 2023, Rishi Sunak made 5 promises.
We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats.
12 months on, only one of those promises has been met. Inflation halved, although critics are divided over how much credit the government should get. Migrants are still attempting the dangerous journey across the English Channel from France.
When will you have stopped the boats?
What's the date for that? Well, the first thing to say is the numbers this year are down by a third.
They're still the second highest, but what is the date?
There isn't a firm date on this because I've always been clear from the beginning.
You said you're going to stop the boat, so I just want to know
and
what
we
the
will
date
keep
is.
going until we do.
Okay.
This is not one of these things where there's a precise date.
Compared to January, waiting lists for treatment on the National Health Service are now higher. So too, the national debt, while the economy is stagnant. A bit like the ruling Conservative Party's poll ratings, which show a consistently massive lead for the Labour Party, led by this man. Sir Keir Starmer, a former barrister and former head of public prosecutions, father of 2 and, if the polls are right, the next UK Prime Minister. Something he could only dream of after the 2019 general election gave Labour, led by socialist Jeremy Corbyn, their worst defeat since 1935.
Mr Corbyn, it's over, Mr Corbyn, isn't it?
That paved the way for Starmer to become leader, and 3.5 years later, he's dragged it back towards the centre, where some experts say elections are won and lost. Domestically, an incoming Labour government faces the same huge problem. With taxes and borrowing sky high, how to grow the economy so public services get the investment they need.
The defining purpose of the next Labour government, the mission that stands above all others, will be raising Britain's productivity growth, a goal that for my Labour Party will become an obsession.
Internationally, Starmer's already been hanging out with world leaders. Here he is with the Greek PM Kyriakos Mitsotakis and the German leader Olaf Scholz. But don't expect any big foreign policy changes from a Labour-led UK. On the Ukraine, Russia and Israel-Palestine conflicts, Keir Starmer has stuck closely to the government's line, even though resisting calls for a ceasefire initially meant losing some of his shadow cabinet.
As in any time of grave crisis, it is crucial that this House speaks with one voice in condemnation of terror, in support for Israel in its time of agony.
The party says its #1 priority will be improving UK-EU trade and relations, but that doesn't mean reopening the Brexit debate. On the so-called special relationship with the US, little would change if Joe Biden wins November's election. But if this man wins...
Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He is truly the worst, most incompetent and most corrupt president in the history of our country.
Starmer concedes he would have to make the relationship work. But that's if the polls are right. And they've been wrong before. Rishi Sunak will decide when the election is held within the next 12 months. But a year is a long time in politics.
What do you want for Christmas?
What do I want for Christmas?
Yes.
Oh gosh, I haven't really thought about that actually. I'd like to have a day off.
He may well get it this year. Paul Hawkins, CGTN.
Well, let's talk to Tim Bale, who's Professor of Politics at London's Queen Mary University. Good to see you, Professor. Welcome back to the programme. So we're almost certainly going to see an election in the UK this year. There has, of course, been endless speculation over the timing of it. Will that, though, make any difference to what most people think is a foregone conclusion?
Well, I guess if you're a Conservative MP, you may hope that something will turn up between now and the probable date of the election, which is the autumn of this year. And that, I think, speaks to some concern on the part of Tory MPs when they hear that the Prime Minister is thinking of going early. I think when you're 20 points behind in the opinion polls, that looks rather a gamble.
So if there is a big loss for the Conservative Party, what could that mean for the future direction of it?
Well, I mean, if you look at what's happened to the Conservative Party before, when it's lost elections very badly, for example, 1997, what we tend to see is the Conservative Party double down on the approach it takes initially in opposition, and that normally means moving towards, if you like, the authoritarian right of the political spectrum. It then takes a couple of elections before they really wake up and smell the coffee, as it were, and realise that they have to move back into the centre in order to win back those voters who have deserted them. So if the past is any guide to the present or indeed the future, then I would expect the Conservatives probably, depending on how badly they lose, to be out of power for at least a couple of terms.
And what about Rishi Sunak himself? This will be the first time he goes before the electorate as Prime Minister after his two predecessors were forced out of office. And he's not exactly been a unifying figure, has he?
No, he hasn't. He's had big party management problems, in part because the policies that he has pursued has satisfied neither side of his political party. So, for example, if we take the issue of immigration, in particular, this plan of the government to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, on the one hand, it strikes many on the so-called soft centre, if you like, of the Conservative Party as too harsh and possibly in conflict with international law. And on the other hand, for the hard right of the party, it doesn't go far enough in taking radical action to do something which they believe has to be done in order to win the party a general election.
Well, you mentioned that issue of immigration. It's obviously been a really big one, but actually when it comes to what voters are looking for, is that the kind of thing that people care about, or is it more likely things like the cost of living crisis and how well off they feel?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at how immigration polls with the public, it has risen in importance over the last year or so. And I think that is in part because the government has spent a long time talking about it, as have their friends in the print media. But if you look more closely at the polling, as you suggest, in fact, it's nowhere near as important to most people as the economy, the cost of living and inflation on the one hand, and the state of the National Health Service and other public services on the other. So it does remain somewhat of a mystery why Conservative MPs see immigration as some sort of magic bullet. I think voters have rather more pressing concerns at the moment, although it's not something, immigration, that they care absolutely nothing about. That's true.
Tim, great to speak to you. Thank you for joining us today. That's Professor Tim Bale from London's Queen Mary University. Somalia says a deal that gives Ethiopia access to a seaport in the breakaway region of Somaliland has no legal force and threatens regional stability. Ethiopia, which is landlocked, signed a deal with Somaliland, which declared independence from Somalia in 1991, but is not recognised internationally. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has called shipping access an existential issue for his country. China says it's in talks with Thailand over mutual visa exemptions for their citizens. It came after the Thai Prime Minister said a deal had been agreed and would begin in March. Thailand is Southeast Asia's second largest economy and relies heavily on tourism. In September, it waived entry requirements for Chinese tourists until February this year. Spanish footballer Jenny Hermoso has been giving evidence against the country's former football boss. Luis Rubiales is facing sexual assault charges after he kissed Hermoso on the lips after the Women's World Cup final in Sydney. The incident sparked a backlash in Spain and internationally over the treatment of women in sport. Hermoso has said that the kiss was non-consensual. Now, what do a chatbot, an asteroid, a syringe and a supercomputer have in common? Well, they're all scientific breakthroughs that change the world in 2023. Here's our correspondent, Michael Marilia.
It's time to talk science. The Chinese Academy of Engineering has released its latest list of global scientific breakthroughs. The Academy says they are all shaping our future, one way or another. We start where else? But space. The Tiangong space station has been up and running since late 2022. China is only the third country to build this type of structure. It orbits Earth at an altitude of nearly 400 kilometers, and it's just one part of an ambitious space program. China is aiming to put astronauts on the moon in 2030. Then there's the vaccine for malaria, a deadly disease spread by mosquitoes. Experts approved the use of the life-saving drug 2 years ago. Now countries are starting to roll it out. Malaria kills nearly 500,000 children every year. This vaccine could change that very quickly. ChatGPT was also one of the biggest innovations. The chatbot system can read, write, learn, and even generate computer code by itself. In a sense, it's the face of artificial intelligence right now. But the list doesn't stop there. These are some of the other breakthroughs that made the cut. The supercomputer system known as Frontier. Believe me, when we say it's super, we're not kidding. This system is more than 1 million times more powerful than the average laptop. The Baihetan hydropower station, a key part of a Chinese energy project which spans nearly 2,000 kilometers. The humanoid robot Atlas and its four-legged friend Spot. The lithium-ion battery, which is the driving force behind electric vehicles. The Harmony operating system, which Huawei uses for some of its most advanced technology. Unmanned aircraft or drones. The Academy says they're getting much smaller, but also much smarter. And finally, some tech which could save the world. Back in 2022, NASA sent a spacecraft smack into an asteroid. Sure, it was 11 million kilometers from Earth, but the DART test mission proves that humans could stop asteroids from hitting the planet. It's a pity the dinosaurs didn't know about that one. But still, great news. Where will we go from here? Who knows? But if this list is anything to go by, science fiction is fast becoming science fact.
The headlines again. A race against time. Rescuers battle to find survivors after Japan's earthquakes as the number of dead rises to 48. And intense fighting continues across Gaza with more than 200 Palestinians killed in the past 24 hours as Israel claims to have captured another Hamas stronghold. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
On today's World Insight, Chinese President Xi Jinping's New Year's address highlighted China's